Hello, this is Jane Miller, Miller Institute, and welcome to this presentation today. I just came across a quote today from Marianne Williamson, and she said, "You must learn a new way to think before you can master a new way to be." And this is really what thinking into results is all about, learning how we think and adopting a new way to think. For more than 15 years, I've been traveling around, motivating, inspiring, and training, helping people understand why they're doing what they're doing and why they don't do many of the things they want to do. Maybe you've heard or read The Secret. That featured Bob Proctor, who happens to be my mentor. There's probably 200 or 300 million people who have seen the movie or read the book, and talks about the law of attraction, how we attract into our lives everything that comes into our lives. And a lot of people might say, I don't know about that. But the universe operates by these laws, so why not? Dr. Werner von Braun, who was the father of the space program, said that the natural laws of this universe are so precise that we don't have any difficulty building spaceships, sending people to the moon, and we can actually time the landing with the precision of a fraction of a second. So again, let's talk about learning a new way to think. I want to introduce you to some ideas that were put together here by Bob Proctor and those that I'm facilitating. I think you're going to like them. And if you really let yourself get into this, it'll change you and your bottom line of your company like night and day. You see, when people in your company become more productive, the increase in profit goes right to the bottom line. Now think about that. All the expenses are looked after, the overhead's looked after. The individuals just raise the bar and they become more productive. That, of course, earns greater profit for the company, and it goes right to the bottom line. So I'm associated with Life Success Production, and they've been involved with this kind of work for 41 years now, over 41 years, and work all over the world. In fact, Bob and Sandy work in about 47 different countries. They've seen results that'll actually shock you. Now, when I first began certifying in their programs, I had a little difficulty believing it myself, and I can share those stories, but what I'd rather tell you, and I'm sure this is what you'd rather learn, is how we accomplish the result. So, although we believe that the first order of business is profit, since a company will go out of business without it, we don't see profit as the purpose of any human organization. We believe that the purpose of all human organization is to make life more meaningful. The program I'll share with you is called Thinking into Results. It's a program that is designed not only to increase profit, but to make life more meaningful for you and for all the individuals in your company. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Think of the number of times you've gone into a hotel, you booked a hotel room, and think of all the people that are serving you there, from the desk clerk to the housekeeper to the servers in the restaurant to the maintenance folks who make sure everything's just comfortable for you. If you took all the people out, if they left, you wouldn't really even have a hotel any longer. You just have a brick and mortar building with a bunch of stuff in it. Well, that's really the same with your company. If you take all the people out of your company, you won't have a company anymore. You'd still have the buildings and things and the systems that sit in there, but nothing's happening. And you see, a company is really people, isn't it? And when we really start to understand this, everything changes. Now, if you know me and you've worked with me, I've been on a 20-year hunt for success. And sure, I've been successful in many, many of the endeavors that I've had over my career. Many of you have gone through skills and leadership training that I conducted. And while they were very, very good, there's a key. Now, how many times have I spoken at your Rotary or your Sertoma Club? Well, I found that the skills and the strategy that I presented, and even the motivation, is key. People, and how they think, that's the critical, vital piece. And when I began to really study this and understand it, that's when my desire just broke loose for excellence and success. And gosh, it just became so easy. Let me to Bob Proctor that you see there in the middle. Now, it's written that Bob's wisdom, and he'll tell you this, comes through a lineage of great teachers beginning all the way back in the 1800s with Andrew Carnegie. He passed it along to Napoleon Hill. Now, Napoleon Hill then passed it to Earl Nightingale, who you see at the bottom right. Earl Nightingale was a radio broadcaster who was one of the first ones to bring these success topics over the airwaves. You know, Bob Proctor worked at the feet of Earl Nightingale for years. He refined all of this. So Bob passes it on to his facilitators like me, and I'm honored to pass it on to you. Now, the first time I ever met or heard Bob Proctor was at a seminar called, you can see it to the left there, Claim Your Power Now. The great Jim Rohn, who's not with us anymore, I had the privilege of hearing him, and Vic Johnson, who's taken Bob's studies and gone even further with it. That was back in 2003. So here 10 years later, I am so honored and grateful to be working side by side with Bob and spreading this information to you. You know, 50 years ago, Bob really was in a bad place. He was 26 years old and bad attitude, bad track record, and he'll tell you he never really accomplished anything. In fact, he left school after a couple months of high school and ended up working in factories and bars. He was in the Navy for a few years then, and he said he was sitting in a fire hall, and a gentleman introduced him to a book. You know, and this man said, "You know, Bob, if you follow the instructions in this book, you can have virtually anything you seriously want." Well, of course, Bob didn't believe it, would you? You see, at the time, you know, Bob was unhappy. He was sick. He was broke. No formal education, no business experience. So he had every reason down pat as to why, you know, he was getting the bad deal in life. You know, and he never took responsibility for it. It was always somebody else or something else. But the man said to him, "Listen, if you're going to change your world, you have to change yourself first." And the man quoted Huxley, the great English writer, who said, "There's only one corner of the universe that you can change, and that's your own self." And he got Bob to start studying this book. Well, everything in his life seemed to change overnight. It wasn't really overnight, but it sure seems that way, you know, looking back now. You know, his income at the time had been $4,000, but it seemed like overnight he was earning over $100,000. Then years passed and he was earning over $1 million. He had started cleaning offices on the side of his fire hall job there, and then, you know, in less than 5 years, he had folks cleaning offices in Toronto, Montreal, Boston, Cleveland, and even England. You know, this thing would just keep growing, and people would say to him, "Bob, what are you doing?" And he would say, "I don't know, I'm just reading this book." You see, he was doing a couple of things that were very unreal. They were totally illogical. He was reading the same book over and over and over again, and he's still reading that book. You know, that was first in 1961, the year I was born. You know, looking back, what Bob was really doing was literally changing his life, but he didn't know why he was changing. He just kept doing it. And one day, he made up his mind he's going to figure out how it happened. You see, nobody could really tell Bob what had happened. He thought just because he was reading this book, and actually he had the principles on records, so he was listening to records and reading the book. And but Bob said he gave the book to other people to read. Nothing happened. And he even shared his records with other people, and nothing happened. He said it took him about 9 years to figure it out. It was the repetition of the ideas that literally reprogrammed his mind. And that's what we're going to get into. You see, you and I are programmed with an understanding or not. We're programmed genetically and environmentally. And when Bob put this together, he decided to teach it to companies. And he decided to put it in a very organized and coherent manner. One of the first companies was Prudential of America. You might remember the insurance great back in the early 70s. You know, their production went up by hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions. It's on record. The top people in the company were shocked. They were sending psychologists in to find out what was going on. And what Bob was really doing was teaching their people to do what they already knew how to do. You see, one of the things we know is how to do a better job. We know how. Think of the training that we've been to, and even I've taught over the years, but we're not doing it. You know, these same concepts have helped tens of thousands of people for many, many, many years. You know, Life Success Productions, whom I'm associated with, has now updated and put the program into not new language, but in a nice package called Thinking into Results. I wanted to share the history so that you can grasp the possibilities too. You know, thinking is the highest function that you and I are capable of. All the great leaders throughout history have been in complete and unanimous agreement on it. You and I become what we think about. You know, well, there are a lot of people who would disagree with that, but the wise ones are in complete and unanimous agreement on that. You know, and again, Earl Nightingale, he was the first radio broadcaster to share these success concepts over the air. And, you know, he said, if the average person said what they were thinking, they'd be speechless. I remember laughing when I first heard that, but it's true. You know, start thinking, and more so start listening to conversations that are going on around you, and you realize people are not thinking at all. You almost have to consciously think. Stand back and watch and listen. Well, rather than spend a lot of time talking about the power of the program, which you'll be able to see, let me mention that the program gets results, but they're permanent results. You know, I know you've been involved in programs in the past where you see a blip on the radar screen, but then the results would go back to where they were. You know, no great change. And I'm talking about getting phenomenal quantum leap in results. You know, results you'd have a tough time buying into, but people already know how to do them. So I'm going to ask you to sit back and relax as we go through this, and you'll want to watch and listen to this over and over again. I want to share what Bob Proctor shares in the program and his experiences. And he's been doing this again for almost 50 years now. This program, it's the best I've seen. Now, many of you know that I come from the electrical utility business. That was really my career motive for many years. So James Lincoln, he was the president of Lincoln Electrical, but at one time he said, companies have historically left their greatest resource largely untapped. That resource is the intelligence, the initiative, the productive power latent in every individual. You know, and it's been said by many greats in the past, but I think Lincoln had put it very well there. You know, we get so busy with things we're doing and projects that we're working on and systems that we're installing, sometimes we forget about the people. You know, the greatest scientists alive won't even guess what your lower producer is capable of doing. Albert Einstein said he couldn't even think of that for himself, that he didn't even use a fraction of his intelligence. There's genius locked up in everyone. The talent and ability within us, it runs so deep, but we've left it dormant. Even when we go to school and get advanced degrees, it just doesn't bring the intelligence to the surface, and we're going to see why. Now, there's two things a person must know if they're going to improve their performance, if they're going to win. And you'll look at this and you say, well, that's pretty obvious. They have to know where they are and where they're going, right? And the first thing we have to look at is results, and it's so simple and obvious that if we look at their results and the person keeps getting the same results, they're stuck. So why are so many people stuck, right? Now, take a look at the results. If you have somebody who comes into work late, they probably do it frequently. Another person shows up early and they probably do it frequently. And we say, oh, I know where the problem is. They have no goals. They have no direction. They have no reason to grow. But we found out that's not really the case, right? They might not have their goals in writing, and they may not be too articulate, but everybody wants something. Everybody wants something. It comes from the essence of who we are. People want to express themselves in a greater way. So here's the problem that we found. It lies in where they are. And I'm not talking about geographically, of course, or even the position in a company. I'm talking about mentally. They don't really know where they are mentally. And, Bob Proctor, who really introduced this to me, he said, Jane, who are you? And I looked at him thinking, well, that's a silly question. I said, well, I'm Jane. He said, you're not Jane. Jane is your name. Well, I said, this is me. And I kind of pointed to my body. And he said, that's not you either. He said, Jane and Miller are just two words. It's your name, but it's not you. And your body's not you. He said, did you ever hear anyone phone into work and say, body is not coming in today, it's sick? No, you say, I'm not coming in today, I'm sick. But you see, you are not your body and you're not your name. We can go, oh gosh, all through education and more and learn very little about who we are. We're just programmed in a certain way, and we're programmed genetically and we're programmed environmentally. It's the paradigms. Paradigms literally control our lives. They control our lives. And we're going to talk a lot about them, but think of it like this to begin with. They're kind of like red lights. It causes people to reach a certain level and then stop. We know how to do better, but we stop. Well, in this program, we're going to turn it into a green light because we're going to see, and I'm going to show you exactly why people stop, and then how to turn that light green and get going. Now take a look at this from John Ruskin. He says, education does not mean teaching people what they do not know. It means teaching them to behave as they do not behave. And then we'll go even further. Remember the quote from Marianne Williamson? You must learn a new way to think before you can master a new way to be. When I was a little kid, maybe you too, and my mom would say to me, Janie, why did you do that? I'd say, I don't know. And she'd say, well, what do you mean you don't know? Well, you know better than that. I'd say, well, I know. Well, then why are you doing it? I'd say, I don't know. Think of some of the people in your company. You've taught them how to do something, but they're not doing it. And you see them continually make the same mistakes. Well, why are they doing that? Guess what? They really don't know. They don't even know they don't know. Boy, as we get into this, things are going to really move for you. So here we are. Paradigms shape our logic. So again, a paradigm is a fixed concept, fixed habit in our mind. It's our belief system. You remember, you know, and I know that everybody once believed the world was flat, and that was logical. I mean, how could you live on the side? It was an accepted fact that planes could not fly. Planes have always been able to fly. It's just that the Wright brothers became aware of how to make it happen. They stepped out of that box, so we say, and they started to think illogically. So our logic controls our perception, and perception is our point of view. Some might say it's our reality, our reality. You're going to find that when we think into results, you know, this helps us to alter that logic because we're creating greater awareness and we're changing our perceptions. You know, our paradigms control how we use our time. Hey, everybody gets the same amount of time, right? We get all that there is. But why is it that some people produce, right? They're so much more productive in a given period of time than others. Well, we know that some people will accomplish more in 1 month than other people will in an entire year. You know, I entire more in any given week than I used to in months. Now, how did it happen? I changed my paradigm. I changed my habits. The paradigms we have, it controls our effectiveness. It controls our productivity. And get this, everyone wants to change this. They all want to learn how to earn more money. Face it. Well, our ability to earn money is controlled by our paradigm. It's true. You see, a person earning $50,000 a year is not automatically going to think about how to earn $50,000 a month. No. They're programmed to think of how to earn $50,000 a year. So you see, these paradigms are a big deal. And again, you know, what are they? What are paradigms? Well, they're the multitude of habits, but this is the interesting part. They're other people's habits that have been passed down from one generation to the next. You see, we inherited almost all of our belief systems. We did not originate them ourselves. Culture? Culture's nothing but a group habit. It's everybody's habits, right? And that's a paradigm. If we move into a different culture, we say they're different, but no, they just appear to be different. You know, a culture or a corporation, let's talk about corporation has a culture, just like with us. There's a paradigm. And as the paradigm of the corporation shifts, then the whole company changes, right? So whether it's individual or culture or corporation, it's all about paradigms. Now, the mind is the greatest power in all of creation. I think we know that. And when we talk about paradigms, we're really talking about the mind. Let me shift gears for just a moment here. Talk about thinking into pictures. Think about an automobile. Really think about it. You think out loud if you like. What color is it? Now you've got the picture of your automobile in your mind, right? Now think about your refrigerator at home. You got that in your mind? Now get these pictures straight. Line them up. You know, we think in pictures. If you think of a feather, you don't think F-E-A-T-H-E-R. No, you get a picture of a feather. The same is true if you see a hot air balloon. You get the picture of a B-A-L-L-O-O-N, right? You don't spell it, you see it, you see? Now, what does your mind look like? That's a question no one can answer because no one has ever really seen the mind. Never seen it. And when we try to think of the mind, because no one's ever seen it, something happens. We become confused. That's really what happens. If you have no picture for it, confusion comes. However, out of confusion comes order. And then it's that higher degree of order that prior to the confusion. Now, stay with me here. You know, some people might say I'm actually a little bit of an oddball because I started to study these things that the average person would never study. Things like this. You know, I constantly have, books in my car or in my bag, and I have shelves of books at home. I just love it. And I'm always going off to seminars. I love to learn. And I'd heard about a doctor from California who was very involved in the holistic movement. It was Dr. Thurman Fleet. And he concluded that the mind was an activity, it's not a thing. He observed that in the medical field, anyway, we were treating symptoms. We weren't treating the causes of problems. And he said if there was going to be any health at all, you had to heal the whole person. So that's where, talking about the holistic health. You can go back as far as Hippocrates, and they were talking about holistic health. I mean, so if there's something wrong with the physical body and you treat the physical body, you're treating the symptoms. So it's like, taking an aspirin for a headache. You're not treating the cause of the headache, you're treating the headache. You're treating the symptom. But Dr. Thurman Lee said that if you're going to treat the whole person, you're going to have a picture of the mind. And since no one ever has really seen the mind, that he'd make a picture of the mind. Now, this little drawing that I'm going to show you might shock you. You might find it simplistic. But certainly when I first saw it, I said, really? But I've come to believe that this is the most valuable lesson that I have ever learned. It gives me an image of the mind and eliminates my confusion. Now when I think of the mind, I have order in my mind. Okay, so let's look at that a little closer. So if we look at the mind, we're going to say that the top of the mind there, or the top big circle, is our mind, right? The top half of the circle is called the conscious mind. The bottom half is the subconscious mind, and then the small circle in the bottom is the body. That's the instrument of the mind. Okay, so as you watch a person's body move or do the things that it does, what you're really doing is seeing the expression of the thoughts of what's going on in the mind. So if you're walking on down the hall, it came from your thought process first. If you raise your hand, actually came from your thought process first, right? So let's take this and apply it to thinking into results. We said that we're dealing with symptoms. So results are symptoms. Balance sheets are symptoms. Income is a symptom. Relationships are symptoms. And what's the cause of all the symptoms? We've got all kinds of behavioral scientists who will treat the behavior, but that doesn't change the results. You can say that behavior causes results. So now, again, we're looking at the conscious mind. Now, we also call this the thinking mind, or the educated mind. This is really the part of our personality that we refer to as the intellect, okay? The intellect. Now, the bottom of the big circle, the subconscious mind. It's really the emotional mind. And the two parts operate quite differently, the subconscious versus the conscious mind. You probably heard of Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Viennese psychiatrist and had spent the war years in a concentration camp, and I don't suppose anyone was subjected to more physical and intellectual abuse than he and his peers, and yet he spoke about one of the last of human freedoms. He said, "No one can cause us to think something we don't want to think." We have the ability to choose. Now, remember, the conscious mind has the ability to accept or reject. You can accept what I'm saying, or you can reject it. Well, I'm suggesting that you do neither. That what you should do is evaluate it and that you really think about it. Don't accept it. Don't reject it. Evaluate it. Think. Think to yourself. Now think about this. If we install these ideas in the company, if I was just to take a few more dollars and invest them in each employee every week over a year, what would happen? Well, I know what's going to happen. The results would absolutely shock you because you're going to show people how to accept the good ideas and how to reject the bad. And even more so, we're going to learn how to think. The conscious mind is part of the mind where we originate ideas, innovation. That's where creation starts. I originate the ideas, and then there's a power within that executes it. Now, the subconscious mind must accept. It has no ability to reject. It doesn't have the ability that I talked about. It's got to accept them. Here's an important point. The subconscious mind cannot differentiate between what is real and what's imagined. So that's huge. You see, if we start to get emotionally involved in an idea, which is what Wernher von Braun did, think about taking a man to the moon? How illogical was that? But when John Kennedy asked Dr. Wernher von Braun, what would it take to carry a man, or build a rocket to carry a man to the moon and bring him back safely to Earth, his response really was simple: the will to do it. Remember that word will, the will to do it. The will is a mental faculty, and we're going to talk about all of these. It's a very powerful part of our personality. Remember, the subconscious mind must accept whatever you give to it. Your company is nothing but the manifestation of an idea that someone was involved in. You see, we have an ability to create the image in our mind and then turn it over to our subconscious mind. And that idea then is expressed with and through the body. Again, the body is an instrument of the mind, and that's what moves us into action and gets us the results that we want. Again, it's so obvious and so simple. And as we mentioned in one of the first graphic illustrations, a couple slides back, so many people are stuck. Why? Well, this is what I'm going to show you. Now, take these next two. This is going to represent the same person. The one on the left represents you now, okay? And the one on the right represents you when you were an infant, when you first arrived on the planet. Now, there is a difference, but we're going to have to change the picture. You see, when we first arrived on the planet, we didn't have a conscious mind, so we've got to take that out and just eliminate it. There it goes. So when we're an infant, the subconscious mind is wide open. And again, remember, the subconscious mind accepts anything you give to it. You see, it doesn't have that ability to accept or reject ideas. It must accept. So whatever is going around, or whatever was going on around you, all the ideas, the thoughts, the images, went right into the baby's mind. You know, that maybe is you or me or Betty over in the next cubicle, right? It's just the way this works. Our mind is programmed, and it's programmed repeatedly with the same thoughts and images. So day in and day out, week in and week out, month in, month out, year in and year out for the first 3 or 4 years of our lives. And that information was being programmed into our mind. And that built our self-image. Now think about, You have some people in your company who have a very strong image. They just know they can do certain things. And there's others that are maybe sheepish and quiet and withdrawn, and they don't think they can do very much. Why is this? It's been established that a child raised with a lot of praise becomes very confident. A child raised with lots of criticism is very insecure when they grow up. So again, if you take a look at the drawing on the left side of the screen, that's you now. But you have within you a paradigm. Remember we were talking about paradigms before? It's those multitudes of habits that have been fixed there. And they were fixed there before you ever had the ability to think. Okay, here's the paradigm. Let's change the scene. How do we do it? Well, here's the child and here's the paradigm. You can think of this as yourself or somebody else, but as we've reached the age of reason, that's when the conscious faculties of our mind begin to develop. You see, and things start to happen. Conscious mind is developing, but the paradigm's in there, okay? That developed over the years. Now, look at these little antennae. Those are our sensory factors. Things like see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, right? Now, here's what you want to grasp. See the paradigm? The person has been programmed from birth to go by what they see and what they hear, what they smell, taste, and touch. So everything has been coming from the outside world. All the direction has been coming from the outside world. That creates the paradigm. Now, let's talk about the heavy hitters, the real successes, the big producers. They operate differently. They're directed by something from inside, not from outside, not from the sensory factors. They talk about going, into their inner space, their sanctum, the quiet voice, but, they've been trained and programmed to do this. Here, from the outside, these are 90% of the way most people operate, the masses. Those different, that's probably only about 3%. So you see again, the information is coming from the outside. But remember earlier I pointed out, that the conscious mind was the intellectual mind. Now Napoleon Hill, he studied with 500 of the most successful people, and he did research his entire life. He wrote The Laws of Achievement, and he wrote Think and Grow Rich. He said an educated person is not necessarily the person with the abundance of general or even specialized knowledge, and an educated person is one who has so developed the faculties of their mind, they can acquire anything they want without violating the rights of others. So what are the intellectual factors? What are these faculties of the mind? Well, we have perception. That was kind of, perception is your reality. We have will that von Braun was talking about in the space program. There's imagination and memory, intuition, reason. Let's talk about some of these. How about memory? That's a great one. Have you ever had anyone say to you, or you even said that you have a bad memory? There's no such thing as a bad memory. Memory is simply your memory. It's not good or bad. So as far as Bob Proctor, I asked him one time, how long do you remember something, Bob? And he said, until I want to forget it. So there's nothing really complicated about memory. It's just you have to learn how to use your memory. Perception. Again, the perception is the point of view. Two people can look at the same thing and see something totally different. I grew up with 5 brothers, and between my dad and my 5 brothers, how many different perceptions do you think were going on there? A lot. as far as perception, you can change, you can raise your level of conscious awareness or your perception about things. As you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Let me say that again. As we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. So here we've got these phenomenal faculties. Imagination, that's great. But we're discouraged from using it at a very early age when we start school. And, it's called not paying attention. The child is punished. So think about why many large organizations have very small creative departments. Imagination, is it not valued? It's valuable. Some of you may know my work with attention deficit disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. My daughter was labeled ADD, and thank goodness. Imagination. Today she designs structurally sound and geographically pleasing packaging for a major candy distributor. How important is that? She had the imagination and the will to do it. So now, what we have to understand is if we're going to change this paradigm, this fixed thing that's stopping us in our tracks, that red light, what we have to do to get it out of the way is to use the subconscious mind the way it was meant to be used. And we do this through these intellectual factors. And really, that's what this whole program does. We want to get that fixed paradigm and just get it to float away and use the mind as it was meant to be. The Thinking into Results program, it's so great because it teaches people to use what they've already got. That's why we have smartphones today. That's why we have high-D television. That's why we've got space travel. That's why I can touch a little phone that I carry in my purse and send a message to 100 people all at the same time. As soon as I touch send, it simultaneously sends it to all these places at the same time, all over the world. Where did it come from? Well, it was always there. We just weren't aware how to do it. The way to fly airplanes was always here. The Wright brothers just had to figure out the way to do it. Well, the way to raise productivity in your company it's already here. Look at this for a moment. You and I have the ability to think, to create the image. We can impress that image upon our subconscious mind. Then we act on it, right? We act on it through the body. And that changes the results that we're looking for. I want you to stop and think of what might happen if everyone in your company actually really understood this. One thing, they'd have a lot more fun. People wouldn't work near as hard as they are, but they'd produce much better results. There'd be more cohesiveness and team effort. They'd be involved in a creative adventure. Competition would be set aside, but cooperation then would be the rule, and that's really what we want to do. So again, we have the ability to create the image in our mind. And when we get emotionally involved with the image that we are thinking of, what do we want it to look like? Talk about vision and visioneering in your company. Strategic plans, goals, all those things that I love to teach and train on. But we need to get emotionally involved with them. How we do it is through those faculties, right? Let's talk about changing our paradigm. There's only really two known ways to do this. Okay, one is an emotional impact. And that can come, in a good or a not so good way. Typically, we'll see an emotional impact, like maybe when a person loses a loved one and their life just changes, or you go to the doctor and he says, boom, you got to stop this or that or you're done, Harry. The other way, which we can control, is through the repetition of an idea. This is what I'd done. It was repetition of ideas. So here I am. I'm reading and studying the same book that Bob Proctor did, that Napoleon Hill did. I was listening to the same recordings, changing my paradigms. I was substituting the ideas that I'd been raised with, genetically and environmentally, and replacing them with ideas that Earl Nightingale had recorded and Napoleon Hill wrote them and Bob Proctor taught them. And you can too. Now, if there's an opposing idea in your paradigm, it's not going to change but through repetition. You know, when we go into a company, we recommend that everyone go through the programs. Everyone. Not just your management staff, not just the sales force, everyone. You know, it's a corporate thing and a personal thing. What is a corporation anyway? It's just a bunch of people. Let's go back and talk about what happens and how repetition changes the paradigm. Okay, so look at this. Now, suppose that the white line that's going to come out here represents the sound. So let's say you're listening to a CD or you're listening to MP3 of some of these recordings. Remember, I said that the paradigm controls logic, and this is going to be illogical. I'm telling you, this program works, it's repetition, it's just thought. It might sound illogical. Okay, so let the red line now represent you listening to the sound. And here's the important part. We hear with our ears, but we listen with our emotions. Now, our subconscious, again, is our emotional mind. That's where the paradigm lies. That's where the red light lies, or the fixed habit. So you're going along and you're listening, oops, and an idea hits your conscious mind, right? Your thinking mind. And off you go on a thought trip. Now you're not listening to the white line anymore, are you? You're up at a higher frequency. The sound is still playing, but you're not listening to it anymore. You know, you're thinking about the idea that struck your mind, and you stop thinking about the idea that you had been listening to, right? So then you stop thinking about that and you come back down and you begin listening again, but just for a short period of time, because bingo, a new idea hits, and off you go again, on to another thought trip, and the sound is still playing. You hear it, but you're not listening, and you keep doing this over and over again. Now, you've just thought about that idea maybe once, but again, if there's an opposing idea in the paradigm, it's not going to change except through repetition over and over and over again. So look at this. Remember, we talked about your little life and the repetition of ideas, and how many times do you think your mom or your dad told you your name before you actually started to respond to it? I would imagine with me it was like this: J, 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 J. And after a while I would hear Janie. It started to come around, right? Ooh, they must be talking about me. You see, but it was the repetition. If they had said, listen, I'm going to tell you something, dear, and I don't want you to ever forget it. Your name is Janie. Well, we don't do that. That's what this is about, repetition. And why this program has been 50 years in the making, because it works, right? So again, thoughts and images, ideas, we accept them, we reject them. What we want to do is not accept or reject them. We want to think about them and accept the ones that we want to flow into our subconscious to create our results. If you know me, you know my style, my magnetic style, and I'm backed by these two wonderful people, Bob Proctor, my mentor, and Sandra Gallagher, who put this program together. Bob's been playing with this information since 1961. He can tell you stories from all over the world. He and Sandy have worked all over the world, and it's just shocking. It's wonderful. Now, I'd like to sit down and talk with you about what we can do together in your company, not what's been done in Acme Chemical, Prudential of America, IBM. I want to talk to you and your company. We'll dig into specifics, and you're going to be quite pleased because this gets results, and the results will stay, and they'll literally shock you. You'll love it. I've been studying this kind of thing, and I've been doing this kind of work for about 18 years now, and I think it's obvious that I love it. I just absolutely love it, and I always come back to it no matter what path I'm on. I think it's an absolute shame that, most people go from the cradle to the casket and they never find out who they are. They never give the gift of their gifts to the world. Forget about all the stuff in the past you've learned, and let me come in and talk to you, and just like that, you're going to. Again, this is Jane Miller. I thank you for sticking with me today. I know it's been a long webinar, and I'm sure you've learned a lot. So give me a call. Invite me in. I'll certainly share this with your staff, your salespeople, whatever you need. Call me at 717-507-0186 or head on over to turnideasintoresults.com, and you'll see a lot of my work there as well. Again, thank you so much. Much success.